Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Melbourne, Australia, Sia Papageorgiou. Sia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Sia is the managing partner for the Center for Strategic Communication and Excellence. She's a multi-award-winning communication consultant and trainer. She's the immediate past chair of the Global Communication Certification Council, and Sia has been recognized, felicitated, and awarded several times. So Sia, before we start talking about communication, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Sure. So I have been working in the field of communication for probably almost 25 years, I'd say. I studied media and communications at university. I always knew I wanted to do something in communication from say, the third year of high school. We had some visiting anchor a famous anchor woman from Melbourne, Australia, visit us at school to tell us about what her career was like as a newsreader. And I was absolutely captured and mesmerized. And I thought, I want to do something like that too, because I just saw this powerful and charismatic woman in front of me sharing information with the world, or with Australia audiences anyway. And so I studied media and communications at university. I then worked in broadcast journalism for about 5 or 6 years. And then I took off, as many Australians do, to London to live and work, where I worked in public relations. That was a lot of fun. I got to do great things like visit Buckingham Palace and meet the Princess Royal as part of my official duties. So that was good. And then I came back to Australia, and I worked mainly in the federal government in a variety of communication roles. And I left the Australian Taxation Office, which is one of the largest Australian federal government agencies, at the end of September in 2014 to become a consultant. And so here we are.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about the Center for Strategic Communication and Excellence. Tell me a little bit about this venture and what was your motivation to start it?
Okay, so our organisation is a global professional development and insights organisation, and our mission is really to elevate the value and visibility of strategic communication as a force for good in society. And we do this in 3 very specific ways across organisations. So the first thing we do is we work to develop strategic communication professionals. So they're the people who are employed by organisations to develop strategic communication for a living, okay? So we work with their teams to increase their strategic communication capability. The second thing we do is build the communication capability of leaders in organisations, because leaders have a very, very important role to play in the communication equation. So we help them understand that role. We help them with, what effective communication looks like and how it can impact an organization's bottom line. And the third thing we do is we build communication skills of employees, because ultimately communication is everybody's responsibility in an organization. Right. So that's what we do in a nutshell. And our organization is very opinionated about the power of good communication. And it was established in 2015 by my business partner, Adrian Cropley. So he was the brainchild behind the establishment of the organisation. However, I met Adrian probably about 2008. And again, this demonstrates the power of effective communication and relationship building, because I met Adrian in 2008 at a conference, and I was speaking at the conference, and Adrian was chairing the conference. And we were introduced and we just clicked immediately. And over the years, I had an in-house role. He was already a consultant at that point. We would meet occasionally for lunch or for coffee, and we'd catch up and talk about communication, talk about what was happening in our profession, talk about our mutual connections, all of that sort of thing. And then when I resigned from my in-house role in 2014, he was the first person I called. And I said, Adrian, I've just left the ATO. And I don't even think I got the sentence out of my mouth, Ash, because he said to me, we have to work together. And so we did. And as you said before, the rest is history. So the two of us joined forces and we have built the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence to what it is today.
Amazing. You also talk about the Global Communication Certification Council on your website. Tell me a little bit about it, and why do you think certification is so important?
Okay, this is a topic very dear to my heart because I'm fiercely passionate about professional standards, particularly in our profession. But the Global Communication Certification Council is an autonomous governing body for the global communication certification program. It was a body that was established by the International Association of Business Communicators, or IABC. That's one of our global professional associations. And so what it does is it maintains an internationally recognized standard of strategic communication excellence based on a global body of knowledge. Okay, so you don't have to be a member of a professional association to participate in the certification program, unlike other programs. It's also the only certification program in the world for communication professionals that is ISO accredited. So it meets ISO standards, in this case, ISO 17024. So there is no other communication certification body that can make that claim. But what it does is it credentials communication professionals, and we have two levels of certification. The first is the SCMP, or the Communication Management Professional certification, and that is for communication professionals who are established in their careers as communication professionals, have been working in communication for at least 6 years. And there are other eligibility criteria when it comes to training and things like that. That's the first level of certification. The second level of certification is the one I have, the Strategic Communication Management Professional, which is for more senior communication professionals who are skilled in providing strategic advice and counsel to an organization's leadership. And to be eligible to sit for the SCMP certification, you need to demonstrate at least 11 years of communication management work experience. But anyway, getting back to your original question around the benefits of a certification, there are many, and this is a topic, Ash, I could talk about all day. But basically, certification, in this particular case, communication certification, does a number of things, okay? The first thing it does is it demonstrates that we have the knowledge and expertise and the professional competence in our area of, in our field, which is in this case, communication. Okay, so it's really that third party endorsement that you meet a particular standard. And in our profession, that, there are 6 building blocks for our work, and it says loud and clear that you meet those 6 building blocks. The other thing it does is elevates your value and visibility, okay? Because it helps us champion our profession. Now, our particular profession, the communication profession, has been battling legitimacy issues for decades, okay? So this is one way that we can say we are a profession, we have a strong purpose, we have ethics, we have standards, and the people that work in our profession meet those standards.
Right.
On an individual basis, I wasn't joking when I said I could talk about this all day. On an individual basis, it helps us maintain our relevance, okay? Communication professionals have demonstrated that we are critical functions, or the function of communication is a critical one, and we demonstrated that through the pandemic, okay? So it helps us maintain our relevance because part of your certification is maintaining your professional knowledge. So you have to demonstrate annually, in this case, that we are keeping up with trends in communication. We're keeping up with, the latest technology. We are on the pulse, so to speak. One thing that our certificants have said to us, though, is that a certification increases your confidence. Okay, so it's led to an increase in confidence. It's led to, more speaking opportunities, brand on, social media, reputation, all of that sort of thing. So, look, there's a number of reasons, but they're probably the main ones.
Wonderful. And what, you must have worked with so many different professionals. What are some of the common challenges a lot of people face in communication?
So from a challenge perspective, probably one of the biggest challenges in an organization when it comes to communication is leaders who don't believe that communication is a critical part of their role. Okay. Or they don't know how to communicate effectively. Because let's face it, many leaders, and we're not talking about those very senior leaders who obviously understand their role and are good storytellers, and there's lots of those. We're talking about the people who are thrust into leadership positions with absolutely no support and no tools to be able to communicate effectively. So, and they're not held accountable for their lack of communication in this instance, and either. So all of that affects engagement, it affects alignment in an organization, it affects trust. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges. There are a couple of other ones that I'd like to mention too. And one of them is around resourcing or employing qualified people to run your communication functions in organizations. That's a critical one. And more often than not, it's particularly in some of those smaller organizations, there is a bit of an attitude that anyone can do communication. We'll just get that person, we'll give them a job, and we'll get them to communicate. But in strategic communication, you need a specific skill set for that. You need a really good understanding of the business operations of the organization. You have to have that business acumen to be able to do that. And the final thing I'd like to mention, Ash, is a robust framework for communication. I cannot tell you how many communication organizations I speak to who advise me that there's not a framework for communication. They don't have a communication strategy that says this is how we communicate in our organization. This is who our people are. These are our stakeholders. These are the channels of communication we have, and this is what they should be used for. This is how we expect leaders to participate in communication. These are our policies and our procedures when it comes to communication. That is missing in many organizations, and that really affects the quality and the robustness of communication across an organization.
But, you're so right, and thank you for a great answer. But I've spoken to so many leaders from around the world, and one challenge I've seen a lot of them face is that they just assume that when they get onto a stage and start talking, and it's a one-way kind of a communication. How do you define communication, and what should leaders do to be able to get understood?
So let's go to your first question, which is how do you define communication? Okay. So in the context of an organization, so when we talk about communication, we're talking about corporate communication. Okay. So that refers to the strategic management of communication within an organization. So how an organization manages both its internal and its external communication. Okay. So things like how it connects with people, how it builds relationships with people. It's, stakeholders, audience groups, and that could be groups like your own employees, critical first step in communication, customers, stakeholders, investors, the media, the general public. So the purpose of communication is to convey messages about the organization's purpose, its vision, its mission, its values, its key priorities, and managing how others, including your own employees, which are often forgotten in the communication equation, how they perceive and understand how the organization operates. Okay. So it really is the most important link between an organization and its various stakeholders and audiences, because it shapes things like the reputation of the organization, the brand of the organization, the image of the organization, and ultimately its identity. And all of that thing plays a role in building relationships, in building credibility for your organization and its people, and building trust, which is, as we know, on the decline, okay, across all of our major institutions. So that's probably, and the flow-on effects, Ash, of that are huge. It impacts employee engagement, it impacts morale, it impacts loyalty, it impacts advocacy. All of that, right down to your social license to operate. The flow-on effects are huge. So if you get strategic communication right from the inside, the bottom line impact and the outcomes on the outside of the organization are huge. But getting back to part two, which is about what leaders are not doing, and we're not talking about all leaders. Obviously, there are some great communicators out there and great leaders who know how to communicate effectively. But for the most part, they're not listening. Communication is not a top-down function. It is an omnidirectional thing. It flows up, down, across, sideways, in every direction. So organizations are not listening when it comes to what their employees need and prefer when it comes to information and communication. What they're doing is making assumptions. Okay, it's like, you know, that story about the senior leadership group who works on the strategy for 12 to 18 months, communicates it once, knows it back to front because they've been working on it for the last 18 months, and turns around and says, but we told people about it. We communicated.
Yeah.
That's not communication. You need to check in. You need to measure the effectiveness of what you're communicating. So leaders need to listen more. And, you know, I always go back to that great quote by George Bernard Shaw that says the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. How do you know your people have received your message? How do you know they've understood it? How do you know they've acted on it? So people need to get better at listening. Organizations need to get better at listening.
Well said. Thank you for a great response. So my next question is, when we were being trained when we were much younger on communication. And in those days, technology wasn't so freely available. We were always told, make sure bad news is given on a Friday evening, good news is given on a Monday morning, because there were only newspapers and the bad news would disappear by the time Monday came. But in today's world, with technology, everything's changing. So I wanted to get your perspective on how is technology changing the communication landscape?
I've never actually heard that saying before, but look, technology is absolutely has changed the communication landscape. It's had a profound impact. I think, you know, the biggest impact it's had is communication is now instantaneous. You know, you can send a text message, you can make voice calls or video calls or share images or other types of media across the world in real time. Those boundaries have melted away. We have never been more connected than we are right now. We can have conversations with our friends and families overseas, with our colleagues and our clients across continents and time zones. It's also given us huge choice around the channels we have to communicate. We can now do things like video conferencing, instant messaging. There are numerous social networking sites. I mean, it's a pretty noisy world, but it has given us that ability to choose how we engage with people. It's also given us greater accessibility. So breaks down language barriers. You know, people with disabilities, for example, can use software or special devices to communicate more effectively. We can translate content pretty easily, or transcribe an entire podcast, for example, in a couple of minutes.
Absolutely.
You know, it helps us build communities, social media, and then collaboration communities. So from an organizational point of view, we've got, you know, we can break down silos, we can collaborate and innovate more effectively. You know, if we didn't have technology, what would have happened during COVID? We literally transformed our organizations overnight to be able to work remotely. I don't think, you know, Zoom became the platform of choice. Jump on a Zoom call. Without technology, we wouldn't have had that opportunity. So it really has revolutionized the way we consume information and we share information, because now we can also personalize our experiences. You and I can you know, select what we want to know as consumers, that is, not so much as employees of organization, but definitely as a consumer, I can choose what I consume.
But Sia, from a corporate communications perspective, with technology, what is now happening is that the people you are communicating to, which are your stakeholders, can now respond on a real-time basis.
Absolutely.
You know, there could be positive comments, negative comments. So how does the communication team or the leaders respond to so much feedback that they're getting on an ongoing basis?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize, Ash, is that not all organizations or all leaders are receptive to that feedback. And I've spoken to many organizations who don't give their employees much of a voice.
Mm.
You know, a once a year opportunity to participate in the employee engagement survey, or whatever you call it, the employee experience survey, you could call it a number of things in your organization,
Yeah.
doesn't cut it. You need to have those lines of communication open all the time.
Mm.
And it takes a really courageous organization to say, we want to hear the good, we want to hear the bad, and we want to hear the ugly.
Wonderful.
And not many organizations do that. You know, some do it really well. Others, you know, hide behind their content, hide behind specific messages, and don't allow their employees to have much of a voice. But those organizations that do things like enable people to make comments on their intranet content, for example. Enable their people to make comments freely on social media platforms. Okay? Give them time during things like town halls or meetings to be able to share their feedback openly. And I'm continually surprised and dismayed by the number of organizations I speak to where the employees say to me, I would never be able to say anything in a meeting. And I'll ask them, why not? I'm just too scared for my job.
Correct.
Which is absolutely mind-blowing.
Well said. So time for two more questions for you, Sia. My next question is on culture. You know, you are in an extremely culturally diverse country. And, you know, culture means culture of the organization, culture of the family that we are in, culture of the community that we live in. How does culture impact communication?
So in terms of corporate culture, so the culture of the organization, that has a huge impact on communication. If your organization has a toxic culture, okay, you'll find there is little or poor communication across the organization. And you'll start to see things like an active grapevine, where there are numerous rumors floating around the organization. Because when there is a void, a communication void, people start to make things up, okay? You'll find that in those organizations with toxic cultures, leaders are not very good communicators, okay? There's also little to no alignment to the organization's purpose, to its vision, to its mission, to its values, or its organizational priority. There is little to no employee voice, so people don't feel they can speak up. They don't have the opportunity to share feedback about things that are going on, about change, about initiatives, about anything that affects their day-to-day. People are working in silos. And there's really importantly, little psychological safety. So just the example I shared earlier about people not having, being fearful about speaking up. Likewise, when there is good communication and a good culture in an organization, you have the exact opposite, okay? You have people who are in the organization who not only have the information they need to do their job, they have the information they need to thrive and excel in their jobs. Okay. There's open and honest communication, which is a real problem across most organizations. They have leaders who listen to people. They actively ask for feedback and do something with that feedback. And you'll notice that they're the organizations who do things like collaborate really well and innovate really well when there is open communication.
Well said. And my last question to you, Sia, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your deep understanding of communication and corporate communication, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of our young viewers and listeners who are in the corporate world, young leaders, to take back from your understanding and from our conversation?
Sure. So the 3 things I want to share with you are, first, use communication to build trusted relationships. Trusted relationships with your colleagues, trusted relationships with the audiences that you are responsible for communicating with, and trusted relationships for your stakeholders, whether they are internal or external. And it really helps. And part of my role is teaching strategic communication. And I always tell my training participants, when you're thinking about the communication you are sharing, put yourself in the shoes of the receiver and ask yourself, what do you want people to know?
Right.
What do you want them to think and feel? And what do you want them to do and say as a result of your communication? And that helps you clarify your messages.
Correct.
The second thing is to listen more than you speak. Okay. It's really, really important. If you are in a leadership position or you are a corporate communication professional whose job is to communicate, give people a voice. Ask for feedback regularly, and importantly, do something with that feedback. People support what they have to create. And if you are demonstrating that you are listening and you are doing something as a result, they will be more likely to participate in whatever it is you're sharing. And the third thing I want to leave for the next generation of communication professionals, or anyone who has a role in communication, such as leaders, ask for help when you need it. Okay. Just because you are in a leadership position does not make you a natural born communicator. Okay. So if you need help, go and ask for it. Ask your corporate communication team to give you the tools and the support and the resources you need to become a better communicator, because communication absolutely can change the world.
Well said. And on that note, Sia, and your 3 wonderful lessons: use communication to build trust and relationships with stakeholders. Second, you said, listen more than you speak. This is, I think really words of wisdom. And I wish people will listen more than they speak and give people a voice. And the third one you said was ask for help when you need it. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey in the world of communication. Thank you for speaking to me about strategic communication excellence, Center for Strategic Communication Excellence. And thank you for also speaking to me about so many different aspects of communication for the corporate world, for leaders, and for a lot of the employees of organizations. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.